to record the session. So we're just getting started for those of you joining us by recording. And so I was going to suggest, last time we had introductions when we got started, and that took a fair amount of time, and people have already been on and have introduced themselves. So I'm going to just say, if you're new, if you haven't been part of any of these meetings, and you'd like to introduce yourself, why don't you do that now? Just raise your hand. Charmaine O'Rourke, just unmute yourself, and then Janet Simon.
Hi, I'm Secretary of the DPLC, Lincoln County. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was on with Lincoln County last week. And
I had to miss it, but I'm going to listen to the recording. So.
Oh, okay. It was a fun chat. Janet, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. I will say I am in the same precinct and neighbor of Rich Weiner, who's on the call with us this evening. And I had been ward chair for 19 years.
It seems awfully to be faint, Patrick.
So I'm just interested. I also do a fair amount of professional legislation for my professional association here in New Mexico.
And what's the professional association?
I am a podiatric physician.
Okay.
Foot and ankle doctor.
Foot and ankle doctor. All right. Anybody else new?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Elliot Skinner. My wife is Linda Hibbs.
Oh.
We're part of People for Peace and been around forever here. And so I'm very familiar with your work and Roxanne's work, but my first time I've taken part in listened to one of these events.
Okay. Anybody else who hasn't been here before and wants to? Okay, Amy Carpenter.
Yes. Hi, I'm Linda Hibbs, and I'm a sidekick of Elliot. And we came to visit and see what's up. As he said, we've been members of a group that's been around now, and it's 30 years plus. And we admire very much the work that this group has done all the way back to Bernie.
Okay.
So we just want to listen, and also along with our meetings, which are now once a month, we do seminars. And we're doing a seminar. We don't even have the date. We've done dozens of seminars, but this time we didn't want to do a seminar until we had something really to offer. And we think we found an essay that really is very much a frame for what's happening right now and how resistance may fit in. So we'll post that once we figure out where we're doing it and the time, and would like to invite all of you. Will that be all right with
Certainly.
Everybody?
Yeah, if you send it to me, I'll put it in the blog and let people know about it.
Okay, and I'll also send a copy of the essay
Okay.
to
Yeah,
you.
that would help. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Anybody else new? Oh, Amy, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm a retired New Mexico secondary public school teacher, and returned to New Mexico to Albuquerque after many years away. And you and your wonderful site and all of the advice that you gave and the information that you gave got me through this last legislative session, which was the first time that I've ever fished in the very dangerous waters of New Mexico politics. So thank you very much.
Here we go.
For that, Paul.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And I'm going to mute Linda over here because there's noise in the background. Okay, so if somebody needs to speak, they can unmute, but I'm going to just go with muted for right now. Let's see. The next thing on the agenda, I just wanted to briefly remind people what we spoke about last time, and it really was just what the scope of work of Rethink is, and the purpose and kind of abiding assumptions. I got a note from a colleague of ours, Craig O'Hare, this morning. Some of you may know Craig. And he wrote and he said, you know, almost every time you write something, I find something I could tell you could be improved. But I just read the Rethink summary, and I can't think of a word I would change. So apparently we got it right. So if you haven't read the Rethink summary, you can go to retakeourdemocracy.org and just click on Rethink. And we're going to go over to that page for part of this, because I've added something to the page there that I think will be of interest to you. So that's what we did last time. And what we're going to do today is try and move a little bit beyond that and take a look at, Roxanne created, sorry, she's not with us today. She's not feeling very well, so she's lying on the couch. This afternoon, she created a sign-up sheet, which also lists what we view right now as the likely roles people could play. And so it'll be, you know, it's just one of those Google Docs sign-up forms like you get from everybody on Earth now. And you can just go in there, put in your name, phone number and stuff. Phone number is only necessarily if you want to be involved in the interim hearings. But we'll go over that in a minute. But the idea, it also lists the roles. And so that's what we're going to talk about, are the roles that people could play, and ways in which, and if people have suggestions for other things that people could do, that would be welcome. And then we're going to go over a new page on the website, which on the Rethink page, which is what we are reading and what we are watching. And I just want to scroll through that with you and identify the things that we're looking at. We're really hoping people will take a look at that. And you know, we see it as a way to get grounded in the assumptions and that are sort of framing what we're doing, and some of the methods that we plan to employ. So, and then I'd also just like to have an open discussion today about what do we want to do with these meetings. I mean, we could be looking at research, we could be looking at, you know, there could be an article from what we are reading that everybody reads and we talk about, or it could be more organizational, where it's like, okay, who's working on what? And those aren't really fun meetings, but they're kind of necessary to having people get grounded on what they're going to do. And not everybody on this page or in this group needs to feel like they have to do research briefs or big studies or anything like that. There's lots more that people can do, and we'll get into that in just a second. But just a couple of housekeeping things. We've had a request that we move our meetings from Wednesday because PDA has meetings on Wednesday, Progressive Democrats of America. Now everybody's got meetings on different days, but those are like strong allies. And so we just didn't want to make it impossible for them to participate. And there's quite a number of those people who would probably be on today. So we're going to move back. We were originally on Tuesdays anyway, when we were the Transformation Study Group. And so we're going to switch it to Tuesday. And so that would make May 25th our next meeting. And then the week after that, the 2 weeks after that, is June 8th. And that's going to be our book club discussion on less is more. And there's no obligation for people here to read the book. Although I do, the more I get into it, and now I'm almost halfway through, the more I think it is just such a foundational piece for getting, and it's so readable. It's not like, you know, I don't know, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book on Indigenous history, where you feel like you're in a graduate history course with like 700 footnotes a page, and just really tough going. I mean, real important writing and real important history, but it's not easy reading, not something you want to read in bed at 9:30 at night. unless you're trying to get to sleep. But this is something you can easily read and be, in chunks. It's quite good.
Paul,
Yeah.
in terms of the next meeting, are you still looking at 6 to 7? Is that the
Yeah.
hour you're planning?
Yeah, I think so. But we're open to, that could be part of an open discussion. Roxanne actually likes it if we meet earlier at 5:30 until 6:30, but then there's people who work, and there's not many of our folks that work, but Katie works, you work, I'm imagining some others work, Michael works. And so that's why we moved it back to 6. But getting into the 7:30 hour can start to be, really carving up dinner time for us anyway. So we're 6 to 7, and we can just try and keep it to that. So that's what's going on there. And then I wondered whether we want to use these meetings, and this is an open discussion, for a combination of because I just said something about how do we use these meetings. We could use them exclusively for focusing on the research areas and the study areas and the policy areas. But part of what we want to do with the work we're doing, and it may be that this year is optimistic, but is to have this information available during the interim sessions in some format. Like if there was something ready to rock and roll, it wouldn't even necessarily have to be legislation. It could be approaches to something that is within the policy areas that we're doing, and pulling together a panel and going to the interim hearings and actually being a presence. And I don't know if any of you have seen the interim hearing committee assignments, but it's actually quite promising. There are several freshman senators who have never been to an interim hearing committee who are now chairs, and of important ones like economic development, community development, and rural economic development. Saya is the chair of that, and Carrie Hamlin is the economic development chair. And so, these are people who we help get elected and also are sort of colleagues of ours. And so it means we could have more access than would normally be the case, because the chairs are the ones that set the agendas. So open to discussion from people. Should we keep this to more of a policy conversation and focused on the things we want to produce? Or should we do like a half and half and have, also a discussion of the interim hearings and what's going on? I'm interested in people's saying something here. Okay, Rich.
I was just holding up 2 fingers. I think both. I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah, it just might make it more difficult to get it all squeezed in an hour. I know the Legislative Finance Committee is meeting all week this week. So they are starting, but it's mostly finance and education so far. And is there anybody else who has any thoughts on that? Yes, Linda. I'm sorry, Laura, what am I doing?
Well, I think it would be useful to have people update or share significant things, but don't feel obligated to share. Like, I'm not in favor of doing a round robin and saying, okay, what have you done in the last 2 weeks? Or, what do you have to say that's interesting in the last 2 weeks? But rather from an organizational standpoint, if you have something that's meaningful to the group, then share it briefly. And from a topic standpoint, whether it's what's going on in the interim meetings or research you've been doing, then again, if the committee has met recently and there was something that was really significant in the committee, or if you've done some research that was really significant, then share it. So we can use our time more wisely that way and have a better sense of what's going on within the group.
Okay. I think that's a good point. And I mean, what we could do is structure it so that the meeting has an interim hearing update. And then each 2 weeks, there's some article or focus area that we are going to be discussing. And I would, a book is not something I would say, okay, we're talking about a book necessarily. That it's rare that we would be doing that, and that'll be on the 8th. But maybe an article, a 10-page article or something that kind of lays out something, and that's something we're going to use as a point of departure. And then if people actually have something that they've produced, like you say, I think the best way to handle that is the way we did with the transformation study group, is that somebody lets me know, you write to me and say, I've got something ready for prime time, ready to be reviewed by the team and get comments. And then we would send it out in advance and so forth. So, but I think we're not quite there yet, but hopefully we'll be soon. Is there any, yes, Jeff, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering whether regarding the interim hearings, is there a published schedule for the hearings, or when they're happening, or what's the composition of the groups, or what the names of the various committees, so we just have a general idea of that. And then also, can we pop into those on Zoom, or what's the procedure for that?
Yeah, I don't think they know yet. I think they're going to be doing a hybrid where you can go to the hearings, but you can also watch on Zoom. But that's one of the things. And, when we get into the roles, you'll see that one of the roles that we're looking for is somebody who can who can be tracking the interim hearings. And so, for example, right now, all you have to do, the author of Less is More is Jason Hickel. Roger Fletcher asked. It's such a good book. It's so good. If someone was monitoring that, then like one of the things I'd want that person to be doing now is calling Legislative Council Services and saying, like, what is the format going to be? When will you be publishing a schedule? Where will the schedule be published? Can people, how can people from the public participate? We want to know that stuff. I think it's very conceivable that Roxanne and I will go to a few interim hearings because we want to get out and about and start visiting with people around the state. And now that we can do that more easily. And so sometimes they have these things for 2 or 3 days in a community that we would want to be going to. And so we might be visiting that. But that's one thing that we could make that a standing agenda item of update, and then that person would update us on, hopefully there is somebody who wants to do that. That person could update us on what just happened the last few days or the last week or so, and what's coming. Laura, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that from past years, usually the first meeting or two of these interim committees is organizational, where they set their agenda and set the meeting dates and the locations. And they publish them on the legislative website as far as, when the meetings are, where they're going to be. And then as you get closer to the meetings, they'll publish the agenda. So that's readily available.
It's what's happening. You go to the nmlegis.gov and go to what's happening. And that's where you went when we were looking for committee hearings, but now it's interim committee hearings.
Yeah, and there's a tab that you click on for interim committee. And that's important to remember that they're, they live in two different places.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, and I'm going to come back, I went away for a second. I'm going to share screen, and we're going to, because this will help in terms of being able to discuss what the roles might be. So this is, this is boring. But I have to put in my name here because you can't get to the next page without putting in something. So I'm going to do that. Oh wait, Gibson, I know my last name. Normally it auto-populates. Okay, so now that's good. I'm an ABRD. So these are the possible roles, and we'll want people to be not fearful of signing up for something and not fearful of signing up for multiple things. You may sign up and decide, just to find out more, to explore the possibility of doing these things. So the first thing is gather research and resources and identify leading edge practitioners in policy areas supported by Rethink. So if there was an area, and there's no writing really involved there, or if it's writing, it's just like a 1-sentence summary of what you found or 2 sentences in each of a series of briefs, or articles, or YouTube videos and so forth. And also whether you found in doing that reading and so forth, who are the cutting edge practitioners in that particular area. And so you might, in a page, have a good inventory of things that if someone then wanted to do some research on that, that would be a good starting point for them. That's for people who like to read and like to explore, but don't necessarily want to sit behind a computer and try and get the sentences right, because that can get hard. And then the second thing is writing the actual research briefs. And you're going to see that Roxanne identified a thing online from the International Center on Policy Advocacy. I believe it's in the UK. And one of the things they have is an essential guide to writing policy briefs. And that is now on our page for Rethink, what we are reading and what we are watching. So we'll take a look at that. And so another task would be to identify and reach out to engage potential allies in any particular area. And what we're trying to do is create a real inventory, if it's rural New Mexico, if it's legislative, growing good government and good legislative practices, if it's public energy, whatever the issue is, what is the who are the key players in the state, who are the legislators we'd want to be able to connect with, that kind of thing. Assembling that inventory would be very much the same as the gathering the research and resources, only this is people, not necessarily research. And the a follow-up to that might be to actually start having initial conversations with them, just telling them this is, I'm working with Rethink, Retake. Probably still want to use Retake because people aren't aware of Rethink yet, I don't think. Yeah, somebody's trying to call me. I bet it's somebody who's trying to get on this Zoom. So anyway, that's another task. Another is to track and observe interim legislative hearings related to Rethink policy areas. And that's something that would be a one-person task. All the others could be various people. Write letters to the editor or longer opinion pieces on Rethink policy topics for local newspapers. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Conduct social media activity. This is something where if we just had one person, I'm guessing that everybody on this call gets e-blasts from truth out, common sense, you know, all the, a range, Next City, a range of different publications that write on various topics. We want somebody who can just, you know, oh, this looks interesting, copy the link, paste it into a Facebook post, and write a sentence or two about it. And we would give you access to the Retake Facebook page, and just do that, like maybe posting 2 articles a day, just to get people out there paying attention to stuff. Our Facebook page is grossly underutilized. And initially, until people get accustomed to it, you will be posting things into a vacuum, because until people start circulating there, Facebook doesn't do much to help you. And then the other thing, we have a list of about 20, and it could be broadened, indivisibles, and you know, there's a group in Los Alamos, there's a group in Rio Arriba County, there's a group in Taos that are just activism groups, and they have Facebook pages. And periodically we'll just take, if there's a blog I really want to make sure people see, we'll go in and do what I just said. We'll go to those pages, drop in a URL and a sentence, and encourage people to go to Retake Our Democracy. So, you know, some of this is research and stuff, but some of this is helping us grow the organization and the awareness of what we're doing. Another topic or area, which I'm sure all of you will really want to do, is to fundraise for Rethink, or to help us think through ways to fundraise. We are going to want to expand our financial base as we start thinking in terms of hiring someone. And we are thinking in terms of hiring someone possibly this summer, midsummer. It would be a community liaison person is what we're calling them. And then the other is just to participate in these huddles and offer input, or just observe and listen because the topic is interesting. And then I think that's, then the last, I have to answer something. So I'll put fundraise. And then the last thing here is, would you like to play an advocacy role in the interim hearings? And if your answer is yes, then we ask you to give us your cell phone number, because there might be some texting involved, to like, oh, by the way, this hearing's going, can you watch it? And then also your Senate district and House district, so we know who your legislature is. And then when you pull that in, you submit and you're done. So that's a very brief form. And those are the roles that we have identified, at least at this point in time. Are there any thoughts? Are there, you don't have to say, oh, I want to do this. Although if you do, that would harm things. But rather, does the form look like it works for you? And can you think of other roles that people might want to play? No hands raised. I guess it was abundantly clear, and we were completely comprehensive in identifying how many things people might want to do. And I'm seeing Michael Spurberg McQueen nod his head vigorously. So Pat, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, Pat Thomas.
Okay. My daughter offered to assist or give a class, for free, if people need help doing social media. She's been starting up a business where she has clients and she writes things for them on Instagram and Facebook and different things, or even help rethink or retake. If you, I don't know exactly what she has to offer in terms of skills, but I know she has some, and particularly with graphic software and things like that. So I'm just letting you know, because I saw one of the lists on the list, it talked about social media and people posting. So if people need to learn how to do that, she just said she'd be willing to help give a class or talk to people or whatever.
I think that's the kind of thing where we could have a Zoom conversation with her Roxanne,
Right.
myself, and anybody else in the group who wanted to either look, just learn more for themselves, but also who
Right.
wanted to do what we were just describing. So I wrote that down, Pat, and you know, I'll get back to you as we find a person and an interest. And if nobody raises their hand at some point, that's something Roxanne and I are going to need to do, or our community liaison. Katie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it might make people more comfortable putting their names down for lots of things, if there was a way for them to indicate how committed they were to the idea. Like, yes, I definitely want to do this, or I am interested in learning more about this position. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Initially, Roxana just said, you know, signing up for. And when I saw it, I said, well, maybe you should put a sentence in there about, or just to explore, because sometimes someone says, you know, that sounds interesting, but I'd really like to know more about what's expected. Like, and we're not going to put in the form that you have to write 12 briefs in the next 12 years. Or whatever, you know, be any more specific than that, because we want it to be flexible. And so I think we could change the form to create a, you know, definitely interested, want more information, 2 check boxes, pick one. And I'm going to make a note of that too. Somebody else was about to say something, I think I heard, or did somebody just sneeze? Anybody raise their hand? No. Okay. So those are good suggestions. And hopefully we'll find someone who's interested in doing the social media, and then we'll hook them up with Pat's daughter and Roxanne and I. And then we'll send out a link to all of you with for the sign up page. And you can sign up. And in worst case scenario, if you want to just be part of the conversation, I think it's the 8th thing on the list is, you know, yeah, I just want to be part of these Zoominars for now, or Zoom conversations for now. Rich, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm probably the only one here who actually worked on a brief, basically completed it, except, you know, you wanted to do some editing. You know, with the transformation study group. And I'm wondering, you know, obviously the focus here is a little bit different, but I'm wondering what I can do with that brief so it would be useful in the interim hearing. And I don't even know what interim hearing is going to address the topic either, or what committee. So, and I know Michael and Laura were involved, but I'm not sure they did actual briefs yet, but still wondering how we merge the functions.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping Adam or Bruce were going to be on, because they also did a brief and they sent it to me, and I sent it back to them with some comments. The changes I was suggesting in theirs were a lot, they came closer in terms of scale. It was a manageable size brief. But I think that one of the things I'm going to ask people to do before they get started is to read the information about the brief that is that we're going to tour in just a minute. And in answer to your question, Rich, I think that for the purposes, it's the reorg that I spoke to you about, where and I don't want, because I don't want to take too much time here, but maybe we could talk either tomorrow or Friday and get because I feel bad about that. And that, I mean, you almost had it done before the session was done, and then the session and the Georgia election and just all of that. And so everything was put on hold until the session was over. And so I think that we do want to have some closure about what you can do to make that a really useful tool. And I think that Roxanne and I own that we really need to, I think we learned from that. It's a really well-written piece, but it was just, from our perspective, it was just too long for any legislator. And when you read the thing that, in fact, I'll start getting ready to get over there. The piece that, where is it? Rethink. There we go. Now I got to come and do share screen. Share screen. Let's rethink. Sorry, guys. Okay. When we do, where was I going? Oh, it's just really important that we define very clearly what the end target is. And for example, in your piece, I would have, in retrospect, I would have said, take one of those tax policies and do a deep dive, or just do a very general and do almost nothing in detail on any of the others. And then that becomes the overarching piece. And then you start building, the models or the specific initiatives or tax reforms that fit within the larger umbrella. So
what I think I can do is just write policy positions, like a page here and a page there that could be given to legislators. It'd be easier actually for me than editing the entire thing would be to use it, to develop whatever we need to develop to advocate for legislation.
I agree. It's just not as familiar for me right now because I haven't looked at it in a few weeks. So this is the Rethink page. So if you've never been here, I'll just quickly go. There's the right here is the vision and strategies, vision and scope of work. Here's the information about today's huddle, next time's huddle, the book club on June 8th. And then this is what we are. Oh, and then down at the bottom is the recording. And I'm recording this one, so that'll go down there. So if somebody missed it, they can catch up. And then this is the newest piece. And hopefully this will work. There we go. Is everybody seeing what we are reading? Okay, so it starts with seminal pieces. And by that, I mean, it's not a real specific topic area. And so this is less is more the book. Another thing that I've been reading and I have been citing in a blog is the COVID-19 and the 21st century public ownership. This is one of the major themes of Rethink, which is that we have gotten away from thinking of the public sector as being able to do anything. It's our Reagan legacy, if you will, and Koch brothers legacy. And this really does a good job. It's only 12 pages and it lays out exactly why we need to go reverse privatization and why we need to look at public ownership of, it's not always public ownership, but public management of things. And so that I highly recommend that. And that's very easy to work through. Our History is the Future is just a great book from Nick Estes. Some of you may know Nick. He's from Albuquerque. He's one of the co-founders of Red Nation. Just got his book with a Red Deal, which is something we'll probably add to this, but I have to read it first. But that is a great book at looking at Indigenous history from a very personal perspective. He does a very good job of wedding history and personal experience and some of his ancestors who were involved in some of the negotiations and so forth, a couple generations ago. But it really also highlights the level of stewardship, the kind of stewardship that the Indigenous people have demonstrated for their relationship with the land, air, and water, and what the implications are going forward in terms of dealing with climate change. This is an Indigenous approach to community wealth building. It's not so much, I wouldn't have put this up here as seminal, except it's a good description of a great process for if you're working in a collaboration with a group of people on a particular topic. It's called a learning lab. And the indigenous person who practiced this she's a Lakota woman, learned it from the Democracy Collaborative. And it's just a very participatory process. This is the International Center on Policy Advocacy and their essential guide to writing policy briefs. Very useful. I wish we had read that before. Interestingly, Rich, what they say is you may write these longer pieces, but those are not for legislators. They're for people like, Paige at New Mexico Voices. And but for policymakers, they say the brief should be no more than 4 pages, and they lay out exactly how, they even go into the formatting in terms of, for people who are going to just scan this instead of read it, how to make sure they get the main takeaways and stuff like that. And so it's like a 16-page thing on how to write a brief. So it's kind of ironic because they didn't follow their own instructions. Then we get into models and initiatives. So that's instead of seminal things. This is energy democracy, and they're taking back power by the next systems project. And what this is about utilities, about states and countries nationalizing or taking over public management of utilities. And I think this is going to, if any of you are following the Avangrid situation, it was the front page of the Albuquerque Journal today. We think that there's some possibility that we will be able to, I see I've got to put a link in there. I didn't put in the link. It says click here to review. I think there's some possibility that if this thing falls apart, P&M could go bankrupt. And if P&M goes bankrupt, there's going to be a discussion of what's next. And it would be good to get ahead of that curve and have some real good solid writing about what is the advantage of having public utilities and not privately owned monopolies who just exploit us. So that's what that's about. It's a very good piece, by the way. Another one I read about this in both the book, the Less is More, and also the piece up here about public ownership. Why am I pointing with my finger? Right in here. They talk about how one of the things we have to do is retake ownership of intellectual property and of the internet. And that those should be public services, not things that are mediated by billionaires. And I think that's an interesting idea. Some of these, it's going back to Rich, you'll remember this is part of our kind of rationale for existence in terms of the transformation study group was to look at things that people maybe haven't ever even thought about, but that make a whole lot of sense. And once you lay out how we're getting screwed, then there's a real receptivity to like, okay, let's, especially with COVID and stuff, people are more receptive to bold ideas. The next thing on the list, so that's socializing big tech is part of what this article is about. All of these are reasonably brief articles, except this one, Public Banks. It's about 30 pages. And this is from Next City, and as it suggests, it's an e-flash book, which is a new term, so that it's not a brief, it's about a 30-page thing, but it's broken up into chapters, so that if you're not interested in what New York is doing in relation to public bank, or what New Mexico is doing or not doing, and so forth, you can work your way through it and pick and choose. But the beginning part offers a primer on what a state bank could do and how it could really help ordinary people and small businesses in a state. And Retake is working really closely with AFLEP, the people who are advancing the public banking. We've had several powwows in the last week or two. And then the next thing is about nationalizing the fossil fuel industry. And so you'll notice that there's a thread through here. All of these are about achieving public dominion, if you will, over industries that have become privatized and are driven by profit. And that's where it's so important that people get the grounding. I wish there was a better article from Jason Hickel that would lay out the basics of his premise. But you know, his premise just basically is that all of the privatization process over the last 500 years since capitalism sort of emerged out of the Middle Ages or medieval times is to extract and exploit. And it hasn't benefited anybody but the wealthy. And they, you know, people will point out that there's all kinds of innovation and technology that has been spurred by capitalism, but that technology has basically served to just continue to enslave us. We're now connected to the internet so that, you know, Google and Facebook can know everything on earth about us and sell our secrets. So that, you know, all you have to do is look up a barbecue on Google search, and for the rest of the week, you'll have nothing but barbecues ads popping up on your screen. And so while there are some technological advances that have occurred, it really has been to aggregate wealth. And he does a really good job of just showing how that evolved out of the medieval times. So this is another one of those cases for nationalizing the fossil fuel industry. And then there's popcorn time, what we're watching. And some of these are really short and great, but this is like world banking explained in less than 2 minutes. And this is about, you know, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and how they go in and just, you can see it's like these guys enslaving the global South, but in 2 minutes, it just makes it abundantly clear. This is in, I believe, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, and it just talks about how corruption is legal in the United States and how things get done, and how if 99% of the general public thinks something's a good idea and the 1% oppose it, it never sees the light of day. And it's stunningly great graphics and stuff that show you just the degree to which this is the case. And this is another really good video, 6 minutes, on the wealth aggregation in the United States. And so all of these are sort of framing need kinds of videos. And then this is just a conversation, and there's the illustrious Jason Hickel. And he gives a pretty good idea. The first thing, 12 minutes, the second thing is 28 minutes. And his basic premise is, and this is something I know Laura is going to bridle at, is that we need to cut loose from growth as a model for our economy, that we have to learn to live with a degrowth, not necessarily shrinking the economy, but not growing it. And not just for environmental reasons, but largely for environmental reasons. But then the decoupling from capitalism is about really restoring the commons. It was very interesting to read about how during the medieval times, starting at about 1350, peasants, in part spurred by the plague, because that really reduced the labor field. A third of Europe died during the Black Plague. And so the feudal lords were not in a bargaining position. They had, and so the peasants revolted for 150 years. It was called the Golden Age of the proletariat. You know, if a lord came to them and said, I need you in my fields, they'd say, no, I've got our own fields over here and I'm busy. And the only time they'd work for the lords is if they needed some extra cash. And then it's just fascinating how, and this is what Hickel lays out, how the lords and the church and some philosophers like Bacon and Descartes changed the worldview about how we think about our relationship to the earth. That if we were going to use the earth to deforest so that we could use the wood to drive the factories, we had to change the worldview about, because for years it was an animism, a pantheistic kind of philosophy. Most people felt, they looked to the world and the moon and the tides and all of this, and they felt connected to it. And so if you were going to ask people to go in and destroy it, you had to have them think differently. And I had never thought about it that way. And so for instance, in Christianity, in Genesis, it's like, you shall go forth and take dominion over the earth. And that was a real shift from thinking like, no, we're kin with the earth. We don't want to dominate it. And they even made it so that human beings were just nothing more than a natural resource. And that's how they could justify colonization and the inclusion process, which was the European version of that, where they just kicked everybody off of their land and took it by the lords. And so he describes some of that in this, but he's just an amusing guy. He's a smart guy. So then the Red Deal, just an article about the Red Deal. And then, not an article, this is from Democracy Now! And then using moral language to frame arguments. This is another one of those things that we need to learn how to do. And that's like in the rethink model, we're not just doing the research, then we're trying to figure out language that will be something that people will be receptive to. And in this instance, they're talking about why scientists are not the best champions of climate science. And then I think this is the last one. Developing the capacity for empathy, and it's just a 3-minute video on adopting other people's perspectives. And that's, of course, something that helps you then figure out what language you might want to use to change people's minds. So that's all up at, all you have to do is go to Retake Our Democracy. And then when you get to the, here we go, get to right here, click on this. And all of those things are available, whether it's the scope of work and everything, but then there's the book club and there's the what we are thinking. So that's the little tour. I'm going to unshare the screen and go back so I can see people. I want to talk more about, like, we now have a meeting planned for 2 weeks from now. And I'd like ideas about how we make it more about, discussing issues rather than just laying out plans. I mean, part of this is organizational because we're just getting this started. So it's a natural thing, but it feels way too much like me talking to you and not enough of us talking to each other. Comments. I'm not going to rescue. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, one approach you might take is to put out a topic in advance and use it as a discussion period so that people can participate and they can think about it before the meeting.
Right.
So they have something that hopefully is concrete and concise to offer.
Does that make sense to people? Let's do a nodding of heads, raising of hands, waving of whatever. Okay, I'm seeing most people smiling and thinking this is a good idea. Yeah. All right, and go ahead, Jeff, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was trying to speak. I've got an idea that I've been percolating. And so I'm thinking, if I just describe it to you, Paul, in an email or something, I'm sure other people have ideas as well for specific, it could turn into a specific bill, a specific piece of legislation. It's kind of a big concept. But is that what you're suggesting, that we might discuss things like that, ideas like that?
Yes, and I'm glad you said that, because if any of you, in looking at the Rethink scope of work, and there's 17 topics there, if any of you look at that and go, I want to write about this, or I want to gather research about that, then, you know, complete the form, and then send us a note and say, I want to get started writing about this, or gathering the research about this, or forming or getting a line. Yes, we want this to be the launching pad where people follow their intuitions and instincts and interests, and do some research, or, you know, just like Bonnie was saying, she's looking for a place to land and find something to do with some time that she wants to commit to stuff. And we're trying to give you a framework where you can go and run with it. And so if you were somebody who likes to write, then, or who wants to do something with the legislature, like Jeff is saying, then we want to just like make that easier for you and provide tools like what we did on that what we are reading and what we're watching. But yes, just write to me and you can get started. Rich, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I would be willing, whether it's next time or the time after, you know, to, I don't know what the word would be, facilitate or introduce, you know, the topic of fair taxation. You know, and people, if they want to read the 23-page brief that Terry and I wrote, they can, or, you know, we could just discuss, you know, what the real objective here is, both in terms of getting the concept into people's consciousness and also the attempts that we made to get legislative results around that, which of course we did not, and we still need to do that. So that could be one place to start off if we're looking at topics.
Yeah, and that's one of our top 5 priorities is tax reform, because part of, you know, I talk quite a bit about the need to get the public sector regenerated. Well, if government's going to do anything, it has to have money. And so that has to come from taxes. And I've been actually reasonably encouraged by Biden saying, you know, we're going to pay for early childhood by raising the capital gains tax. Easy. You know, well, all right. That sounds like a good idea. We didn't get very far in New Mexico on that, but we could. And so, you know, having a really good presentation on the options there would be good, Rich. Other comments? Yes, Amy.
Yes, Paul, I think it would really help if, because I'm kind of at the tabula rasa stage right now. I'm just a sponge. And what would really help me would be if people who throw ideas into the hopper for general discussion or for potential would also support that with some ancillary readings or ancillary recordings, as you have done, which means that we're not looking through only one lens that's already been predigested. And we actually can have something to make a more informed decision from.
Okay. Well, that's actually one of the things that we need to do. And I wanted to read the thing from the Center on Policy Advocacy about briefs, what they should look like. Roxanne read it and she just told me it's excellent and I have to read it today. I'll probably read it tomorrow. But is to provide a template for people as to what these things should look like. And then part of that would be, you know, additional reading, you know, links to additional reading. Because part of what we want to just do, I mean, it's sort of like working with a group like you, then we want to be able to go, as you read more and more and more on these topics and are more and more comfortable with talking to other people about them or sharing an article with someone. That's part of what the whole concept of Retake was that, you know, you find out about something through us and then you share it with some friends and they get interested and so forth. And that's the way we grow the organization. But it's also the way we change things, you know, if there's more and more people who are not shy about talking about colonization and capitalism, or about cooperatives. And I hope some of you saw the thing I put in the blog today or yesterday, about there's a cooperative catalyst doing a workshop on cooperatives. I'll have to look at my phone to see when. I think it's either tomorrow or next week. See. Oh, it's next week. So that's coming up. And, you know, those are the kinds of things we want to make sure people know about. Anything else from people? Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Rich's comment about doing the review of fair taxes. In terms of topics, maybe we should take the top 5 priorities that you've already laid out and take one for each meeting until we exhaust those topics, because it will get us all thinking about what those priorities are. And since they're your priorities, then when we start talking to people, again, we'll be talking about the priorities.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so, you know, what I'd like to do now is to absorb some of this. We had, you know, the suggestion from Pat about her daughter and social media, the change in that Katie suggested in the form, so that it makes it easier for people to say, I'm interested, but I need to know more. But also now just how we structure each session, each individual session together, but then even the sequencing. And so your suggestion in terms of the sequencing, it might be a little ambitious, because if you look at those 5 or 6 topics, they're big topics. And so to be able to do the overview, you know, within 2 weeks, of course, nothing focuses the mind better than a deadline. So if I have to get it done because you guys are going to be there waiting to get the overview so we can talk about it, maybe it'll get done more quickly. But maybe also some of you will step up and say, topic number 3, I think I can manage that. I want to take a shot at it. So, but I'll take some time tomorrow to formulate some thinking about what we've talked tonight about and send out a note. And but I think that at the very least, saying that the next meeting will have a focus on a particular topic that has one, not a book, but an article that people can read and feel pretty grounded, and then we'll talk about it. And then that might pique interest so that somebody goes, I'd like to write about that. I'd like to do something about that. So are there any other comments or thoughts? All right.
One other thing to follow up, Paul, is that when you say that the first 5 or 6 priorities are really big, well, we don't have to cover all of it in a one evening's conversation.
Right.
You know, if we have, what can you cover in a half an hour? So maybe you pick a chunk of that and support it with an article, and that becomes the basis for the discussion.
Okay. I just wanted to write that down. The memory doesn't work quite as well as it did when I was 30. And so I always get everybody on the screen going, oh yeah, I know. Any other comments or thoughts? I want to try and honor the time. It's a couple minutes after 7, and we want to try and keep these to an hour. Any other thoughts? All right, seeing none. I'm going to take a quick look in the chat to see if there was any, because I can't, you know, people chat and I can't really look at, thank you, Dave, about the powwow. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I regretted it. So I'll take a look at the chat when we get off, but I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to end the recording now. And so